Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. You can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 3. Marius Grown Up. At this epoch, Marius was 20 years of age. It was 3 years since he had left his grandfather. Both parties had remained on the same terms without attempting to approach each other, and without seeking to see each other. Besides, what was the use of seeing each other? Marius was the brass vase, while Father Gillenormand was the iron pot. We admit that Marius was mistaken as to his grandfather's heart. He had imagined that Monsieur Gillenormand had never loved him, and that crusty, harsh, and smiling old fellow who cursed, shouted, and stormed, and brandished his cane, cherished for him at the most only that affection which is at once slight and severe, of the dotards of the comedy. Marius was an error. There are fathers who do not love their children. There exists no grandfather who does not adore his grandson. At bottom, as we have said, Monsieur Gillenormand idolized Marius. He idolized him after his own fashion, with an accompaniment of snappishness and boxes on the ear. But this child once gone, he felt a black void in his heart. He would allow no one to mention the child to him, and all the while secretly regretted that he was so well obeyed. At first, he hoped that this Bonapartist, this Jacobin, this terrorist, this Septembrist would return. But the weeks passed by. Years passed. To Monsieur Gillenormand's great despair, the blood drinker did not make his appearance. "I could not do otherwise than turn him out," said the grandfather to himself. And he asked himself, if the thing were to do over again, would I do it? His pride instantly answered yes, but his aged head, which he shook in silence, replied sadly no. He had his hours of depression. He missed Marius. Old men need affection as they need the sun. It is warmth. Strong as his nature was, the absence of Marius had wrought some change in him. Nothing in the world could have induced him to take a step towards that rogue. But he suffered. He never inquired about him, but he thought of him incessantly. He lived in the Marais in a more and more retired manner. He was still merry and violent as of old, but his merriment had a convulsive harshness, and his violences always terminated in a sort of gentle and gloomy dejection. He sometimes said, "Oh, if he only would return, what a good box on the ear I would give him." As for his aunt, she thought too little to love much. Marius was no longer for her much more than a vague black form, and she eventually came to occupy herself with him much less than with the cat or the paroquet, which she probably had. What augmented Father Gillenormand's secret suffering was that he locked it all up within his breast, and did not allow its existence to be divined. His sorrow was like those recently invented furnaces which consume their own smoke. It sometimes happened that officious busybodies spoke to him of Marius and asked him, "What is your grandson doing? What has become of him?" The old bourgeois replied with a sigh that he was a sad case, and giving a fillip to his cuff, if he wished to appear gay, "Monsieur le Baron de Pontmercy is practicing pettifogging in some corner or other." While the old man regretted, Marius applauded himself. As is the case with all good-hearted people, misfortune had eradicated his bitterness. He only thought of Monsieur Gillenormand in an amiable light, but he had set his mind on not receiving anything more from the man who had been unkind to his father. This was the mitigated translation of his first indignation. Moreover, he was happy at having suffered, and at suffering still. It was for his father's sake. The hardness of his life satisfied and pleased him. He said to himself with a sort of joy that it was certainly the least he could do, that it was an expiation, that had it not been for that, He would have been punished in some other way, and later on for his impious indifference towards his father. And such a father, that it would not have been just that his father should have all the suffering, and he none of it. And that in any case, what were his toils and his destitution compared with the Colonel's heroic life? That, in short, the only way for him to approach his father and resemble him was to be brave in the face of indigence, as the other had been valiant before the enemy. And that was no doubt what the Colonel had meant to imply by his words, "He will be worthy of it." Words which Marius continued to wear. Not on his breast, since the Colonel's writing had disappeared, but in his heart. And then, on the day when his grandfather had turned him out of doors, he had been only a child. Now he was a man. He felt it. Misery, we repeat, had been good for him. Poverty in youth, when it succeeds, has this magnificent property about it, that it turns the whole will towards effort, and the whole soul towards aspiration. Poverty instantly lays material life bare and renders it hideous, hence inexpressible bounds towards the ideal life. The wealthy young man has 100 coarse and brilliant distractions: horse races, hunting, dogs, tobacco, gaming, good repasts, and all the rest of it. Occupations for the baser side of the soul, at the expense of the loftier and more delicate sides. The poor young man wins his bread with difficulty. He eats. When he has eaten, he has nothing more but meditation. He goes to the spectacles which God furnishes gratis. He gazes at the sky, space, the stars, flowers, children, the humanity among which he is suffering, the creation amid which he beams. He gazes so much on humanity that he perceives its soul. He gazes upon creation to such an extent that he beholds God. He dreams. He feels himself great. He dreams on and feels himself tender. From the egotism of the man who suffers, he passes to the compassion of the man who meditates. An admirable sentiment breaks forth in him: forgetfulness of self and pity for all. And he thinks of the innumerable enjoyments which nature offers, gives and lavishes to souls which stand open, and refuses to souls that are closed. He comes to pity. The millionaire of the mind, the millionaire of money. All hatred departs from his heart, in proportion as light penetrates his spirit. And is he unhappy? No. The misery of a young man is never miserable. The first young lad who comes to hand, however poor he may be, with his strength, his health, his rapid walk, his brilliant eyes, his warmly circulating blood, his black hair, his red lips, his white teeth, his pure breath, will always arouse the envy of an aged emperor. And then every morning he sets himself afresh to the task of earning his bread. And while his hands earn his bread, his dorsal column gains pride. His brain gathers ideas. His task finished, he returns to ineffable ecstasies, to contemplation, to joys. He beholds his feet set in afflictions, in obstacles, on the pavement, in the nettles, sometimes in the mire, his head in the light. He is firm, serene, gentle, peaceful, attentive, serious, content with little, kindly. And he thanks God for having bestowed on him those two forms of riches which many a rich man lacks: work, which makes him free, and thought, which makes him dignified. This is what had happened with Marius. To tell the truth, he inclined a little too much to the side of contemplation. From the day when he had succeeded in earning his living with some approach to certainty, he had stopped, thinking it good to be poor, and retrenching time from his work to give to thought. That is to say, he sometimes passed entire days in meditation, absorbed, engulfed like a visionary, in the mute voluptuousness of ecstasy and inward radiance. He had thus propounded the problem of his life: to toil as little as possible at material labor, in order to toil as much as possible at the labor which is impalpable. In other words, to bestow a few hours on real life and to cast the rest to the infinite. As he believed that he lacked nothing, he did not perceive that contemplation, thus understood, ends by becoming one of the forms of idleness, that he was contenting himself with conquering the first necessities of life, and that he was resting from his labors too soon. It was evident that for this energetic and enthusiastic nature, this could only be a transitory state, and that at the first shock against the inevitable complications of destiny, Marius would awaken. In the meantime, although he was a lawyer, And whatever Father Gillenormand thought about the matter, he was not practicing. He was not even pettifogging. Meditation had turned him aside from pleading. To haunt attorneys, to follow the court, to hunt up cases. What a bore. Why should he do it? He saw no reason for changing the manner of gaining his livelihood. The obscure and ill-paid publishing establishment had come to mean for him a sure source of work which did not involve too much labor, as we have explained, and which sufficed for his wants. One of the publishers for whom he worked, Monsieur Magamel, I think, offered to take him into his own house, to lodge him well, to furnish him with regular occupation, and to give him 1,500 francs a year. To be well lodged. 1,500 francs. No doubt, but renounce his liberty? Beyond fixed wages. A sort of hired man of letters. According to Marius's opinion, if he accepted, his position would become both better and worse at the same time. He acquired comfort and lost his dignity. It was a fine and complete unhappiness, converted into a repulsive and ridiculous state of torture. Something like the case of a blind man who should recover the sight of one eye. He refused. Marius dwelt in solitude, owing to its taste for remaining outside of everything, and through having been too much alarmed. He had not entered decidedly into the group presided over by Enjolras. They had remained good friends. They were ready to assist each other on occasion in every possible way, but nothing more. Marius had two friends, one young, Courfeyrac, and one old, Monsieur Mabeuf. He inclined more to the old man. In the first place, he owed to him the revolution which had taken place within him. To him he was indebted for having known and loved his father. He operated on me for a cataract, he said. The churchwarden had certainly played a decisive part. It was not, however, that Monsieur Mabeuf had been anything but the calm and impassive agent of Providence in this connection. He had enlightened Marius by chance, and without being aware of the fact. As does a candle which someone brings. He had been the candle and not the someone. As for Marius's inward political revolution, Monsieur Mabeuf was totally incapable of comprehending it, of willing or of directing it. As we shall see Monsieur Mabeuf again later on, a few words will not be superfluous. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget you can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com, and while you're there, check out our t-shirt shop. You can look in the show notes or on our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media. You can find us everywhere at Bite at a Time Books.